Hi guys, and welcome back to another true crime and makeup time video. Today's case is just so wild, and you know, dating people has been around for God knows how long. You meet someone you like, you go on a date, sometimes enter into a relationship, sometimes go on blind dates. Dating is just so normal, and most of the time, if the dates don't click, the people just move on. But when you look at dating culture a little bit closer, you realize sometimes we go on dates with people who are complete strangers. And we forget that. Even if you date them for a couple months, they really are strangers. Valerie Reyes went on a date, then entered into a relationship which cost her life. The most unusual part of this entire case is that Valerie predicted her own death. Let's get into it. Valerie was born on April 1st, 1994 in New Rochelle, New York. Valerie was raised by her loving parents, Sal and Norma, and she was one of 4 siblings. She had one older brother and 2 younger brothers, and Valerie was extremely close with her entire family. She was described as kind and creative and had a passion for all things art. Her mother, Norma, described her as a compassionate, intricate, and selfless young woman who really worked hard for the things she wanted in her life. She was a homebody who loved to read, and she graduated from New Rochelle High School in 2012. And then she later on attended the College of New Rochelle. In school and in college, she had many friends, and they all described her as a happy, loving, and a really kind person. Like I said, Valerie's family was extremely close, and Sunday was their family day, and Valerie always looked forward to those days. On Sundays, they would meet up and do family activities like go out to eat or play board games or go to the park, and she would play hide and seek with her younger brothers, and they would just be silly and affectionate together and really have just quality family time. Valerie worked at the Barnes & Noble bookstore in Eastchester at the Vernon Hills Shopping Center, and she really loved this job. She loved to read. She would take books out to coffee shops. She would sing in her apartment. She would take long walks, go on hikes. But her actual passion was art and creative expression. She would draw portraits of her friends, and she wanted to be a tattoo artist like her older brother. She used to actually let him practice tattoos on her when he was still in the early stages of learning. Valerie had the soul of an artist, but the work ethic of a CEO. Although she was a generally positive person, she did struggle with episodes of anxiety and depression, and she would get anxiety attacks at times, but then use her creativity and expression to fight these bouts of depression and anxiety and just to get out of that funk. In around January 2018, Valerie met a man named Javier on a dating website. They only dated for around 3 months before they broke up in April of 2018. Valerie didn't really see the relationship going anywhere, and she had told friends that Javier was more interested in the relationship than she was, and it was causing tension between them, and that's why they broke up. So after they broke up, Javier continued to contact her here and there, but in September of 2018, this is like months after they broke up, he contacts her and he lets her know that he would like to reimburse her because he accidentally used her debit card information for a purchase. I don't know how it is in America, but over here, you need to have like your actual debit card to be able to use that to buy anything. So unless he had her actual card, which in a 3-month relationship, are we really doing that now? Like, are we really giving guys our credit card? Like, who knows? Maybe he took it from her. Who knows? But that's what he was trying to get in touch with. He's like, I want to pay you back. You know, I used your debit card. At this point, Valerie was sick of his constant communication, and she was like, you know what? I'm just going to get a friend to deal with this reimbursement transaction. So she contacted one of her friends and she was like, hey, can you just deal with him? Like, get this money back, whatever needs to happen. But after this, Javier was kind of like, oh, he kind of got the message and he seemed to move on. Fast forward to a few months later. At this point, Valerie, she's 24 years old, and she had been living in this basement apartment in New Rochelle, New York, which is about 30 kilometers away from Manhattan. She had been living in this apartment by herself for quite some time, but recently she had been growing anxious and even felt a bit paranoid of being alone in that apartment. On January 28th, 2019, Valerie makes a phone call to her mother in a panic, and she's expressing her concerns, and she tells her mom, "I'm scared, I'm paranoid, I'm getting anxiety attacks. I'm afraid someone is going to murder me." I mean, as a mom, can you imagine what she must have thought? Norma said that Valerie just sounded so scared and frightened of being alone in that apartment. And the previous day was Sunday. They had their family day and everything seemed normal and they had a great day. So why the sudden change in her mood and mind? Now, like I said, Valerie had suffered in the past from anxiety and depression, and clearly that day she was upset by whatever was happening in her life. She told her mom she was experiencing anxiety attacks from her fear. It was very unclear why she felt this way, and she didn't really say much to her mom, but her mom did know that Valerie had recently broken up with another boyfriend. Now, this was a new boyfriend, a boyfriend that she had just recently started seeing, and she had only broken up with him 5 days prior. So her mom was like, "Does how you feel have anything to do with this breakup with this guy?" Valerie said no. So her mom was like, "Well, is anyone at your apartment?" And then Valerie was kind of vague, but then they ended up just ending the call. Norma just decided it was better to just let Valerie rest. She was planning to see her the next day for a shopping trip anyways. So she was like, "I'll just talk to her then." Later that night, Valerie sent a text to her mom saying, "Good night, Mama, I'm feeling better." That night, Valerie also had a text conversation with her best friend, Jeffrey Anderson. They had been friends for close to a decade, and she spoke to him about her anxiety, how she was scared, and soon they said goodnight because Valerie had work the following morning, so she wanted to get some sleep. So the next day is Tuesday, 29th January 2019, and Norma had plans to meet Valerie for a shopping trip at Home Depot. But Valerie was not answering any calls, she was not responding to any texts, and she didn't show up to meet her mom. Norma wasn't too concerned. She thought, maybe Valerie just slept in from being so upset the night prior. But what she didn't know was that Valerie had actually missed her shift at work that morning, and she also wasn't responding to any friends or family that day. On January 30th, the following day, so the Wednesday, Valerie missed another shift at work. This was so unlike Valerie. She would never just not show up without any explanation. So then, knowing what Valerie had just told her a couple of nights prior, Norma now knew something was really wrong. Any calls to Valerie's phone went straight to voicemail, suggesting that it had been turned off. After this, Valerie was reported missing by her family to the New Rochelle Police Department, and a missing persons report was filed. Posters with Valerie's face and details were distributed around the area, and people were told to be on the lookout for Valerie, given that in recent times there had been a few murders of women in the area. Police went to her apartment first. They found no signs of struggle there, but they did notice random tiny bloodstains here and there. So they found it on her pillowcase, the toilet, and the bathroom floor. But they were such tiny bloodstains that they could have just come from Valerie just living her day-to-day life. But missing from her apartment was her phone, her iPad, her wallet, and some of her clothes and random bed sheets. So did she run away? Did she need to get away? So police began to think that, but her family was like, no, she would never just leave. She would never do that without at least telling somebody how she felt. And given that just literally a couple nights ago, she was telling her mom that she was afraid that someone was going to kill her, her family definitely felt that foul play was involved. So the first suspect they went to was her ex-boyfriend, but he was soon ruled out because he was really actively involved in searching for Valerie. Over the next few days, police, together with her family and friends, they turned to social media and they asked the public for help. Then a friend of hers came forward and said that she had seen Valerie near New Rochelle train station. So the police put out descriptions of Valerie in what she was last seen wearing, which was a green coat, black jeans, and black shoes. Now, because she was also apparently last seen at a train station, police believed that she was no longer in the area. So they began tracking her bank account, and the police found CCTV footage of a woman matching Valerie's description at a Chase Bank near Radio City Music Hall in New York City at 6:30 a.m. on January 30th. This footage was then shown to her mom, Norma, who confirmed it was Valerie. So then on January 31st, the New York Police Department, they tweeted a picture of Valerie asking if anyone had seen her, and they wrote beside it, "Suffers from anxiety and depression." And friends and family also posted about Valerie being missing on social media, but despite the multiple posts, despite asking the public for help, no one came forward about any information. There were absolutely no leads. No one had seen or heard from Valerie until a week later. On 5th February 2019, a group of highway workers in Greenwich, Connecticut, noticed a red suitcase in the area about 15 to 20 feet away from the main road. This suitcase looked suspicious as it was just lying in this wooded area on the side of the main road, and it looked heavy and full. So one of these workers, curiosity got the best of him, so he goes up to the suitcase and he began to open it. When he unzipped it, he immediately vomited from the horrific smell that seeped out. They called the police. When the police arrived, they opened up the suitcase, and inside they found the dead body of a woman. The victim was wearing a shirt that was unbuttoned with jeans and no shoes. The ankles and knees were bound, and then her hands were bound at the wrist. She had multiple layers of tape covering her mouth and her chin, and multiple injuries to her face and her head. She looked like she had been beaten so badly. She suffered from a cracked skull, a broken nose, fractured cheekbones, and a large hematoma on the side of her face. Her body had begun decomposing, and the cause of death was found to be homicidal asphyxiation. The next day, the body in the suitcase was confirmed to be Valerie Reyes. Her father and her brother had the brutal job of identifying her body. Now, if that discovery wasn't horrific enough, it was later discovered that one of the highway workers, James Clifford, he had in fact taken photos of Valerie's body and the crime scene and distributed it to multiple people. Just casually, like a horrific crime scene, you know, a dead body of a young woman, and he's just sharing that with people. So the way he was actually outed was one of the people that he shared these images to shared these images to a media outlet called the Journal News, who then identified James. The Department of Public Works, who James worked for, placed him on administrative leave while they investigated the incident, but he didn't get charged. He was just suspended and then made to attend sensitivity training. The department did put out a statement saying, "The victim was a daughter, a sister, and a cousin of a family who was suffering a tremendous loss at this time. This thoughtless and insensitive behavior by an employee is inexcusable." I mean, that was the last thing Valerie's family needed. Some people have no clue. So remember, after Valerie was reported missing, the police tracked her bank activity, right? So it was discovered that on January 29th at around 5 a.m., just a few hours after Valerie was last heard from, her bank card was used at an ATM in New Rochelle and $1,000 was withdrawn. So the surveillance footage showed a man. He was wearing black pants, Adidas shoes, and a black hoodie, covering his face and accessing her account. Then they were also able to see his vehicle and track it back to a rental vehicle, which was a Honda Civic, and it was only hired for 2 days on January 28th and January 29th. The exact time period before and after Valerie went missing. This car was rented by none other than Javier, Valerie's ex-boyfriend, whom she only dated for 3 months. Over the next few days after she went missing, further withdrawals were made by Javier from Valerie's account totaling up to $5,350. So who was this guy? Javier Enrique da Silva Rojas was born on January 3rd, 1995, and he was the same age as Valerie, 24 years old. He was originally from Venezuela and he had dual citizenship with Portugal as well. He went to uni to study journalism in 2017 and then he moved to the US. He moved to the US on a specific visa waiver that allowed people from a really small list of countries to come to the US for 90 days without an official visa. During this time, the country of Venezuela was in the middle of an economic and financial crisis, which was leading to hyperinflation and contributing to a scarcity of goods in the country, such as basic food and medicine, and led to a lot of unemployment. Since 2014, nearly 8 million Venezuelan refugees have fled to nearby countries and some further away where governments have granted them temporary residency. Javier was someone who wanted to escape these circumstances that life had thrown at him, and once his 90 days of living in the US were up, he didn't want to leave. He wanted a better life, but he was living illegally in the US. He lived in Flushing, New York, and worked various jobs, one for a cleaning company, then he worked as a barista, then a short order cook. He liked horror movies and gaming, and he stayed pretty quiet throughout his time in the US. His friends, however, said he was a thoughtful, kind guy who would help anyone. In January 2018, when he met Valerie on a dating website, he fell pretty quick for her, and he posted about her a lot on his social media, and he said his favorite thing about Valerie was the way she smelled. But Valerie felt that Javier wanted more from the relationship that she could offer him, and he actually wanted to move in with her, and that's when she broke up with him. He didn't take it well when she broke up with him. He constantly contacted her to the point where she had to actually block him from accessing her by all means. Her mother, Norma, knew of this relationship, and she did not take kindly to Javier. She got the vibe that he was controlling and manipulative because he would use the excuse of his mother dying from cancer back in Venezuela to get Valerie to feel sorry for him and talk to him. His mother's illness was never confirmed, and Norma felt that Javier just could not accept Valerie's rejection, and he couldn't handle being told no. And Valerie did feel sorry for him at times, but even months after their breakup, I mean, they were together for like 3 months and months later, the guy would literally send her songs and messages, and it's been like double the time of their relationship and he's still, chasing after her. So on 13th September 2018, when he tried to contact her again about using her debit card, she was like, I don't want to deal with you, and she got her friend to deal with him. She sent her friend a text message saying, I don't want to talk to him at all or have anything to do with him. It was when she offered her friend's bank account details for Javier to do the whole reimbursement transaction that Javier finally left her alone. Or so it seemed. On February 11th, 2019, Javier was arrested at his apartment in Flushing, New York. During his interrogation, he gave multiple reasons why he was using Valerie's debit card and withdrawing money. He first said he found her wallet on the street in Manhattan, and then the PIN to her debit card was written on a piece of paper inside the wallet. He denied having seen Valerie for over a year. He said he hadn't even been to the area where she lived. The police then showed him evidence of his rental car and the location. So then he was like, okay, yes, I was there, but I blacked out. And then he was shown pictures of Valerie's body in the suitcase. He then finally admitted that he was in fact in touch with Valerie on January 28th. He said he went to her apartment, and in one final act of passion, despite not being together for months, he had rough sex with Valerie. He said during this encounter, Valerie fell and hit her head. He actually said they both fell and that she was the one that wasn't responding. And after this, he panicked and put the tape over her mouth to stop her from screaming. He then bound her with the tape, put her body in the suitcase, and then dumped it. Police then took his DNA, and they were able to match it to the DNA found on the handle of the suitcase, as well as to the substance found under Valerie's fingernails. But his story didn't match the evidence that the police by this time had uncovered. Also, the witness accounts who stated that Valerie wanted nothing to do with Javier, so she would not be having sex with him in one final act of passion. They found that prior to visiting Valerie's apartment, Javier had put his phone on airplane mode. And forensic evidence showed that Valerie had died from suffocation inside the suitcase from the multiple layers of tape covering her mouth. Also, if his story was true, why bind her and then proceed to empty her bank account? Javier then said that he bound Valerie because she didn't fit inside the suitcase, and that he went and withdrew from her bank accounts because he wanted to be caught by the police. Why not just turn yourself in then? Also, given her mental state and the conversation that she had had with her mom just that night, why would Valerie want to have sex with Javier when he randomly showed up at her apartment that night? Who would do that? And why did her face have multiple injuries when she fell and hit her head? Police then found a possible motive. On January 24th, 2019, around a week before Valerie went missing, Javier sent a text message to a woman he was romantically involved with. It said, "I just found my ex fucking in my bed with the guy next door in New Rochelle, but I didn't want to tell you shit." How would Javier know this? Valerie lived in New Rochelle, like 15, 24 Ks away from his house in Flushing. How did he find Valerie in his bed? He didn't live in her apartment. From this, it was clear that Javier was stalking Valerie, that he was possessive over her, angry that he wasn't the one in a relationship with her. If he saw Valerie hooking up with someone else, would this have caused him to rage? So this is what the evidence shows happened on the night of January 28th, 2019. In the evening, Javier rents that Honda Civic in Flushing, New York, and drives to Valerie's apartment in New Rochelle. He arrives there early that morning. I believe he put the address in the GPS as a church that was close to Valerie's apartment, and then he turns his phone onto airplane mode. And phone pings showed that he was only 200 feet away from Valerie's building. Why would he switch his phone into airplane mode unless he was planning to do something bad? It's unknown whether Valerie let him in or he pushed his way into Valerie's home after she opened the door. But at this point, after his entry, there was an altercation between the two of them. Javier's DNA was found on swabs taken from Valerie's breasts and genitals. This DNA, together with the DNA found under Valerie's fingernails, indicated that a sexual interaction did take place between the two of them, but it probably was not consensual like Javier claimed. She probably fought him, defended herself, scratched him. The violent altercation resulted in Valerie suffering from head trauma that resulted in bruising on her face, together with that large hematoma on the side of her face. While Valerie was debilitated, Javier then covered her mouth and chin with several layers of packing tape, bound her feet and hands with that same packing tape together with twine before putting her into that red suitcase. The same suitcase the two of them had used together on a trip they had taken while they were in a relationship. The layers of packing tape around Valerie's mouth and chin, together with the head injuries and the face injuries, would have made it so difficult for Valerie to breathe, and then to be stuffed inside this suitcase that literally just fit her, would have virtually just cut off her air supply. I think his actions after he put Valerie into the suitcase show how callous he truly is. After he placed her in the suitcase, trapped her in the suitcase, he then took her and placed her in his rental car. He went back to her apartment, he cleaned up whatever he could, and that's probably why the police found such little evidence over there. 3 hours later, he turns Valerie's phone on airplane mode. He sits in his car, goes through her phone, which he had to unlock using her fingerprint while she was trapped in the suitcase inside his car. He then drove to Greenwich, Connecticut, where he dumped the suitcase in that wooded area with Valerie still inside. Now, he did this without knowing whether Valerie was still alive or dead. On his way back home, after using her phone to access her bank information, he then throws her phone off the Whitestone Bridge. After this is when he went to those various ATMs to withdraw money from her bank. What's wild is that it was later found that after looking through her phone in the car like hours later, he logged into Valerie's bank account app using her fingerprint. Meaning that after he already used her fingerprint to log into the phone, he went back into the back of the car, unzipped the suitcase, grabbed her hand, used her fingerprint to unlock the app, and then either retied her or placed her back in the suitcase and then zipped her back up. He would have done that once or twice, you know, once for logging into her actual phone, once for logging into the bank account. So clearly, he was not distressed. He was just kind of like, yeah, sorry, I just need your fingerprint. I mean, she couldn't even scream probably. She was probably already losing oxygen. When he returned back to his apartment, he turns his phone back on and he kept Valerie's iPad and one of the pillows that he took from her apartment, you know, just for the memes. He later exchanged Valerie's iPad for an Apple monitor and a laptop. This callous mofo later took pictures with his new purchases and later told friends he just found it. On February 12th, 2019, Javier is charged with kidnapping, resulting in death. Punishment for this crime could be life in prison or the death penalty. Now, this case took a while to get to trial because Javier's defense kept trying to paint him as this victim. And they were doing this to try and get the death penalty off the table. They said that, you know, apart from this horrific, brutal, calculated murder that he committed, Javier was otherwise a decent guy. No prior criminal record, you know, good reputation, cool, nice guy. He was from a country that collapsed. He was forced to drop out of college and escape Venezuela. He arrived in the US with just $600. You know, he worked hard and he never got into any trouble. They said he was stressed, you know, being separated from his family and became dependent on drugs. This is what they refer to him as. A broken man, someone who is sincerely sorry for his actions and understands the horrific nature of his conduct. Luckily for him, they reached a plea agreement, and on February 5th, 2020, he pled guilty. He finally admitted that between January 28th and 29th, 2019, he entered Valerie's apartment, and after a violent struggle, he bound her, placed her in the suitcase, and disposed of her body. That his actions resulted in the death of Valerie. He made a statement, "No words can express how repulsed I am by the acts I committed. I will never forgive myself for that. I cannot ask her family to forgive me because I don't deserve it. I would like them to know that I'm very sorry." Valerie's mother, Norma, told the court that her daughter was the light of her life and her best friend. She condemned Javier's behavior, calling him a selfish, greedy, soulless person. He deserved nothing but pain and rejection. As Norma made this statement, Javier sobbed quietly. On September 23rd, 2021, 26-year-old Javier was sentenced to 30 years in prison for kidnapping, resulting in death, and unlawfully transporting 24-year-old Valerie Reyes' body to Connecticut. And due to him being present in the US illegally, he will be deported back to Venezuela once his sentence is complete. Valerie brought joy and happiness to all those around her. Her death sent shockwaves throughout the community. She had her entire life in front of her, and Javier took that away in the cruelest form. Her final memories will be darkness. Being trapped in her own Suitcase. What was the motive? Jealousy? Greed for money? I mean, her death does not seem accidental. His actions were way too calculated, and he knew he was going to harm her before he even stepped foot inside her apartment. But to then carry on stealing from the person you just killed truly shows he had no remorse. Life has a funny way of working out, because if he didn't do that, if he didn't steal from her bank, the police may have never caught him. This case truly shows you that anyone can have enemies, even if you've only dated someone for 3 months. I don't know how families who deal with tragedies like this, you know, Valerie's family, will ever truly recover from something like this happening to them. Valerie didn't deserve any of this happening. She was literally moving on with her life. But the fact that she predicted her own death goes to show you that maybe they did have a further altercation prior, and she knew that he was gonna hurt her. Honestly, such a sad and tragic case. My prayers to Valerie's family. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, guys. And I will see you in next week's video. Besitos. Bye.